Last season was promising for the Bulls. LaVine made yet another offensive improvement, becoming more efficient and a more threatening playmaker. Rookie Patrick Williams lived up to the hype he received on the defensive end coming into the league, and his outside shot was much more consistent than many, including myself, thought it would be. The biggest news of Chicago's season was the pickup of all-star big man Nikola Vucevic. He can score in the low post, stretch the defense at the perimeter, and play make extremely well for a big. We only saw a glimpse at his fit with LaVine, but with a full season of playing together, the impact should be on full display. The Bulls finished 2 games outside of the play-in tournament, but should have high hope going into the season given their off-season. So diving into that off-season, let's talk about their additions, 2 big ones via the trade, and DeMar DeRozan and Lonzo Ball. Both were signed in trades. The trade regarding DeMar DeRozan saw Chicago give away Thaddeus Young, Al-Farouq Aminu, a protected first-round pick, and a second-round pick, which in my opinion is a pretty damn good trade on Chicago's end. The biggest loss there, or actually I'll talk about losses in the next section, but they picked up Lonzo Ball by giving away Garrett Temple, Satoransky, and a second-round pick, which was another very savvy move by Bulls GM Arturas Karnisovas. I want to say that's his name. I'll talk about the actual fit of these 2 players on Chicago's team in a later section, but right off the bat, these are 2 W pickups. In the draft, they got Ayu Dosunmu, who I haven't really done that much research on. And in the free agency signings, they picked up Alex Caruso, Derrick Jones Jr., and Tony Bradley. Yeah, they got my boy Alex. It's tough to see him not in the Lakers, but he got his bag, and he's going to have a bigger role in Chicago because he's kind of the exact player that Chicago's needed over the past couple years. He brings much needed defense in the backcourt, and he's a playmaker as well. He's not going to be a very vital on-ball scorer, but I view him in a role of being like a true point guard, taking on some roles in just terms of setting up the offense in the second unit, and I think he could definitely fit perfectly in the second unit in the backcourt next to Kobe White. The pickup of DJJ is somebody who can be a much needed versatile forward. Before they picked him up, Chicago needed some bench forward depth, and DJJ is pretty much going to be a good rotational forward for the remainder of his career because he's very athletic. He's always going to be a constant inside scoring lob threat and a very positionless defender. And in picking up Tony Bradley served as a solid backup center in Utah for the past 2 or 3 years, I think. And Chicago just needed a backup center because I think they were going to roll out Cristiano Felicio as their backup center if they didn't get Tony Bradley. So in terms of subtractions, in the trade market they lost Thaddeus Young, Tomas Satoransky, and Garrett Temple. Thaddeus Young's the big loss because Thad Young is like one of the pinnacle versatile forward veterans. Like, he's kind of your Swiss Army knife do-it-all type of player, Draymond Green light. He's a great playmaker at the 4, a great positionless defender, and he can stretch the floor quite a bit. He was alongside with him and Patrick Williams. Those were the 2 players that were carrying Chicago's defense last year. So the loss of him will be a bit more impactful than others may see it to be, but I think the pickup of DeMar DeRozan will be worth it in the long term, because at the end of the day, they are getting the more talented player. They're getting a player that can raise their ceiling instead of keeping Thaddeus Young, who's a player who will raise your floor. In free agency, Chicago lost Lauri Markkanen, Daniel Tice, and Otto Porter. The biggest name here is Lauri Markkanen, whose time in Chicago was a very interesting one. His first 2 seasons there were very promising. I think he made all-rookie first team his rookie year, and then his second year he kind of broke out. After that, his usage was down due to the way that Jim Boylen used him, and I think his confidence really plummeted alongside that usage, and he just never was the same player in Chicago, and he really just needed a change of scenery. It didn't really make sense for Chicago to bring him back, and it didn't really make sense for him to go back to Chicago. So I think this is a great mutual decision for them both to part ways. The loss of Daniel Tice would have been a bigger issue for me if they didn't get Tony Bradley in replacement, because Daniel Theis is a very smart defensive center. He's not going to be somebody who's going to block all the shots. He's going to get dunked on more than he blocks shots, but he's very smart. He has a bit more versatility in terms of switching on the guards when he has to, because he's a bit smaller. There is some skill that is lost at that backup center position by losing Daniel Theis, but they get more of a rim-running athletic center in Tony Bradley to replace Daniel Theis. Now we get to the fun part where we look at the current personnel of the Bulls. Starting with the guards, it's going to be Zach LaVine, Lonzo Ball, Kobe White, and Alex Caruso. This is a crazy combination of playmaking, shot creation, athleticism, and defense. Lonzo and Alex were definitely brought in to provide the defense at the point guard positions, because Chicago, in drafting Kobe White 2 years ago, they added another scorer for a shooting guard alongside Zach LaVine. They tried to make it work by playing the two together, but it obviously wasn't going to work long term, and you're obviously going to choose Zach LaVine in the starting lineup over Kobe White. So Kobe White's most likely going to be the full-time sixth man, and Zach and Kobe aren't really going to play that many minutes together. They're going to be paired alongside the defensive playmaking point guards of Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso. At the forwards, Chicago has DeMar DeRozan, Patrick Williams, Troy Brown Jr., and Derrick Jones Jr. This forward lineup is athletic as hell. DeMar DeRozan is an elite slashing scorer. Patrick Williams is a great leaper off of 2 feet. Derrick Jones Jr. is airplane mode. Yeah, this is a big and very athletic forward rotation that Chicago has. And 3 of these forwards are going to be great on defense, obviously excluding DeMar DeRozan. And their center rotation is going to look like Vucevic and Tony Bradley. I touched on what Vuce can do for a team. Tony Bradley is a solid pickup for a backup center, better than having Cristiano Felicio. He's a solid replacement for Theis. He's not going to provide the spacing and switchability, but he'll be a better rebounder and a better rim protecting presence. So evaluating the roster, there's a lot more of a balance throughout this team. There's better balance on this team. Mainly last year, there was hella talent for individual shot creation on roster, but holes for defense and playmaking. The additions that Chicago made in the offseason basically plugged these holes. Pause. DeMar and Lonzo and Caruso are all good to great playmakers. Zoe and Caruso will be the point guards on the court at all times. They're both great on-ball and off-ball defenders as well. And there's so much playmaking throughout the team on like every position. Zoe is probably the most selfless player in the league. Caruso has great vision on the break. DeMar is top 3 in terms of playmaking small forwards, and Vucevic is a great playmaking center. I touched on this as well, the athleticism on this team. LaVine, we already know, 2-time dunk contest winner. DeMar in airplane mode coming in. Lonzo should have a plethora of lob options in the fast break and in the half court via backdoor cuts. It should be very fun to watch this team on League Pass. And not only Lonzo, Vucevic and DeMar DeRozan will have more options in terms of spotting cuts from the high post that they like to operate in. So I want to talk about the fits a bit more specifically. Are they going to be for better or for the worst? In terms of Lonzo coming in, he's played the past 2 seasons with on-ball scoring options in front of him in Zion and Brandon Ingram in New Orleans, so I think he should be fine playing behind the scoring of Vucevic, DeMar, and Zach. Kobe White will move to the full-time 6th man role, which I think suits him much better. In terms of DeMar DeRozan, he's always been the lead shot creator on his teams, so this is going to be a bit of an adjustment for him going to play with LaVine, who's definitely going to be the lead scorer. And the same goes with LaVine, because the past 3 years he's been the lead shot creator. This year will be no different for him, but he's never really played with one who's on his caliber. I mean, if you go back to the Minnesota LaVine days, he played behind Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns, but he wasn't at the caliber of a scorer that he is now, and that's really what I'm referring to. In his Chicago days, he's never played with somebody who's been close to his shot creation level or caliber, and DeMar DeRozan is that. So I'm really going to be paying attention to both of these players' off-ball game, which more so DeMar, because LaVine can catch and shoot off ball, off floppy action from the perimeter, but DeMar has never really had that and never really ever will have that. So I'm going to be interested in what his off-ball game will look like in Chicago, specifically playing off of Zach LaVine. Looking forward to next season, the starting lineup should obviously be Zoe at the point, Zach at the 2, DeMar at the 3, Patrick Williams at the 4, and Vooch down low. This is a very intriguing mixture of shot creation, playmaking, athleticism, and defense, and honestly just talent in general. Chicago went through, I guess, kind of a complete makeover because they added an all-star caliber player in DeMar. Vucevic, also an all-star caliber player who was added last regular season, and Lonzo, who's the most solid playmaking point guard in the league. So there's just been a big influx of talent coming into Chicago over the past calendar year. And I think that's going to pay off for them, as I think they'll go above 500 this year and finish 42-40, putting them at around the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference, comfortably in the playoffs. In terms of estimating ratings, I think they'll have a top 10 offense this year, maybe around 9th in offensive rating, because I really think this offense will be damn good. Additional shot creating, the amount of playmaking on roster, players more entrenched in solidified roles. This offense is going to be extremely high powered. I think it can potentially be top 5, but there are going to be some swing factors. One of the swing factors being the shooting of Lonzo, P. Will, and the role player shooting consistency. Lonzo and Patrick Williams had great percentages from 3 last season, but I just want to see them do it again for me to be a bit more confident that they can do it for the remainder of their careers consistently. Also, the outside shooting of the likes of Derrick Jones and Troy Brown, it's going to be a little shaky. So we'll see how much of a factor that will play in terms of how high powered this offense can be. And I touched on this a bit earlier, DeRozan's off-ball play will be a big swing factor. If it's really a problem of him playing off-ball a lot of the times when Zach is doing his thing, then that might be an issue for the offense, but I'm confident that they'll make it work. They're both elite offensive weapons, they're both savvy and smart on the offensive end, so I think they should be able to make it work. On the defensive end, I think they'll be middle of the pack, around 16th. By no means do I think their defense will be bad because of the additions that Chicago made on the defensive end this offseason, but I am still a bit weary of Vooch, DeMar, and Zach in the same starting 5 on defense. Lonzo and P. Will are going to have to carry that starting 5 on defense. But Caruso and DJJ should be great defensively in the second unit, so I think that will all balance out in the end and put Chicago around the middle of the pack defensively. So yeah, I think Chicago will make their first playoff appearance since I think the Jimmy Butler, D-Wade, Rondo experiment, which was, I want to say, I think that was 2K17 days, so probably 5 years ago. But yeah, I think the Bulls will make the playoffs, and they'll probably have to face either the Bucks, 76ers, or actually I don't know who's going to be the 3 seed in the East, but they'll have to face an elite team out East, either the Bucks, Nets, or another team, and they'll probably get the first round boot from one of those teams. So the direction for Chicago is kind of hard to gauge. I don't think you can say that they're contending. They're not a contender. They're not rebuilding because this team is playoff bound. They're not selling. They can't be selling. They literally just added Vooch, DeMar, and Lonzo. So I guess I kind of made this direction up. They're competing. Chicago will kind of be gauging how far this core can go. They can, I guess, treat it kind of like a trial year, though I'm sure they're confident that they'll be competing for a first round home court advantage in the playoffs. I think the Bulls will be one of the hottest teams to watch on NBA League Pass throughout the year, mainly due to their offensive potential. I think they can be extremely dynamic on that end. They have an abundance of shot creation with Zach, DeMar, Vooch, and Kobe White. Offense should come a lot easier with the additions of Lonzo and DeMar, who are great playmakers, in addition to Vooch, who's a great passer from the low block. I'm also hoping that Billy Donovan will encourage his team to get out in transition whenever afforded the opportunity. This team is young and extremely athletic with guys like LaVine, DeRozan, Patrick Williams, DJJ, and Caruso, who should all serve as great lob targets for Zoe to find on the break. The swing factor for this team will be defense. Despite the additions of Caruso and Ball, who will provide much needed on-ball defense in the backcourt, I'm still wary of Chicago on this end. mainly due to the trio of Vooch, Levine, and DeMar in the starting lineup. If there's anything that holds Chicago back from making the postseason, I'd place money on it being their defense. Regardless, the Bulls should be a very interesting team due to the amount of roster turnover and just the electrifying offense that I project them to have. And they also should make the playoffs for the first time in about half a decade.